guys, welcome back to Nadir Audio. In today's video we're going to take a look at the Topping E30 external DAC. So I'm going to give you guys a brief overview of its features, and then we're going to see how it sounds in my main system and talk about how it stacks up with the Modi 3. So up until now I've been using this external Modi 3 DAC in both this system, which is my desktop system I use to listen to headphones and also to mix and master music. But I've also been using the Modi 3 in my main system, which is also in this room. And so I've just been physically moving it back and forth as I need it in one or the other, which isn't as bad as it sounds, but it does become a pain over time. And so I thought, let's go ahead and get a dedicated DAC for the main system. Now, I had thought about upgrading to something a little bit more high-end, and I may do that in the not too distant future. But I thought to start, let's explore some of the audiophile DACs at the entry level, the inexpensive ones, just to get a better sense of what I'm looking for in a DAC overall, and then we'll upgrade to something else. Now, what caught my attention about the Topping is that it is a pretty fully featured DAC for the price. It's got a lot more features than the Modi 3 does. So, for example, the Modi 3, it does everything you need to do, and it sounds great, but if you want to switch between the Toslink optical input and the coax input, which I need to do for different devices in my main system, I have to get up and flip that switch. Now that's not a huge deal, but it's a little bit of a pain, so I thought it'd be nice to have something that came with a remote control. And in actuality, the Topping is actually pretty good at just auto-detecting the active input and switching on its own. So in practice, I haven't had to use the remote control all that much, but it's kind of nice to have it. So in addition, the Topping also comes with a built-in preamp. Now that's not something I'm currently using because I'm using an integrated tube amp, but it's kind of cool. It's something that we can play around with in the future if we're using different power amplifiers. Now, to switch this thing to different modes, right now you can tell that it's in DAC mode because it's showing what the input is. We got the 44.1 PCM showing. But to switch the mode, you just turn it off, and then if you turn it back on and hold this button down, it will give you the ability to switch it into preamp mode. And now if we turn it back on, you'll see that instead of showing what type of input it is, it's actually showing our volume at 0 dB, and then we can use the remote control to turn that up and down, and that in turn will change the volume on the pre-outs. Now, for now, we don't need it to use it that way, so we can put it back into DAC mode just by turning it off, and then when we turn it on, we'll hold the button down again, and then we'll wait for it to go to DAC, and then we let go. And then when we turn it on again, it should show us our DAC mode display, which is great. So again, it's not something I need right now, but it's kind of cool that this has that. But we're not going to talk too much about that in this video. So in addition to the features I've showed you, the remote allows you obviously to switch to different inputs. There are some filters. I haven't played around with those too much. But that's something maybe we'll talk about in a future video. You can mute, obviously. You can turn that auto select feature on and off. You can dim or brighten the display. And that's pretty much it. So it's, it doesn't do all that much stuff, but everything that you would need, so you never have to get up when you're using it in your main system. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about how it sounds. So let's switch over to my main system, and we'll talk about it with some recordings that I've listened to. So I did want to mention that the Topping does support high-res audio. Everything that we're listening to for this video is either 44.1 kilohertz 16-bit or 48 kilohertz 24-bit, so it's all standard def stuff. Now, I do have a small SACD collection. Unfortunately, at the moment, I don't have a working SACD player, so that's something that maybe we can revisit in a future video. But I did want to mention that it supports it. It goes up to 768 kilohertz at 32-bit, so pretty high if that's a consideration for you for buying this unit. Now, as soon as I plugged this unit into my main system, I did hear a noticeable difference between it and the Modi 3. And the first thing that you notice is more weight to the sound of instruments and voices, so that they feel a little bit more present, more in front of you, and there's a little bit more definition around sounds. And the trade-off is that you get a little bit less of that airiness and spaciousness at the top end. So now I don't want to imply that the Modi 3 is a soft sounding DAC, because it's not. It's actually very detailed. Both of these DACs are. But it is a little bit more laid back, but then you do get that kind of a nice top end. Now that's something that the tube amp is always very good at. So if you're listening to a very good recording with a nice ambient room sound, it can be very intoxicating with the tube amp and the Modi 3. You get a little less of that with the topping, but it's still very good. But what the topping brings with that sort of weight at the in the bass and the lower mids, you know, the tube amp it has plenty of bass response, but it's a little bit looser, a little less well defined in that area, and I feel like the weight of the topping actually firms it up a little bit, makes it a little tighter, and actually improves the sound in that range. So that's something that was kind of nice, and I think that worked well with a lot of recordings. Now, the one other thing with the topping, I did feel that with some of my music that is more compressed, you know, modern recordings that have a little bit more compression and harshness in the sound, I do feel like the topping was less forgiving with that stuff, where the Modi 3 helped smooth it off a bit, and you can listen to some things with the Modi 3 that just don't sound that great with the topping, just due to the quality of the recording. So that's one thing to bear in mind too. I think it depends on what kind of music you're listening to, what your collection looks like. But yeah, let's take a look at some of the music that I listened to recently with the topping. So one of the first recordings I listened to on the E30 was Mark Nassif's With Space in Mind. Now, one of the tracks from this was on the original Audiophiliac MA recording sampler, and I had wanted to pick up a copy of the CD for a long time, but they just never printed it up on CD again. So eventually I just bought the CD quality download from the site. And this is a really amazing album, but one of the things that really stood out again was the weight that was added to the sound. So this is it's actually all just drums and percussion played in a really nice sounding room with some really great microphones. And the weight really adds a lot to this, and there's just a certain richness that comes out. It was really kind of amazing. Now we lost a little bit of that airy room sound, but not enough to make it unenjoyable to listen to. It actually sounds really good. So with this recording, I didn't have a real clear favorite between the Modi 3 and the E30. They're just different, but it sounds really amazing, and I really enjoyed listening to it. Another album I listened to was Mirror Repair by Gastro del Sol. Now this was a band of the guitarist Dave Grubbs, guitarist and pianist. He was originally in Squirrel Bait, and then he was in the band Bastro in the late 80s and early 90s, and this was his 90s band. It's much more mellow than the earlier stuff, so a lot of it is just piano and acoustic guitar and interesting other sounds mixed in. One of the tracks has drums on it, but for the piano it really added a lot to the tone and richness. I felt like on this recording. It's actually a better recording than I remember it being, and I really enjoyed listening to it recently. I also listened to Brian Eno's Apollo Atmospheres and Soundtracks. If you haven't ever checked that out, it's a really amazing recording, and I really enjoyed listening to it on this setup as well. I did listen to a lot of jazz with this setup, so I listened to Ornette Coleman's Art of the Improvisers. Now this is actually a compilation CD that I have a soft spot for, because it was in regular rotation at Ned's bookstore in Berkeley when I worked there in the late 90s, and I was really getting into jazz at the time, and so this was sort of my introduction to Ornette Coleman, and it's really kind of an amazing collection of songs, and it sounded great. So the nice room sound, live sound sounds good, and the tone, especially of the horns, was just really good with the E30, and so I really enjoyed listening to that all the way through. I also listened to a lot of classical music. One that stood out was the Emerson String Quartet with Mislav Rostropovich playing Schubert's String Quintet in C major. Now this was on the Deutsche Grammophon label, and I sometimes find this recording to be a little bit on the flat side, a little bit one note, but I do feel like the added weight that we got with the instruments on this, it really did add a lot to the dimensionality, and makes it feel more like you actually are there, like it's a live recording, and I liked it a lot. Actually, I felt like I enjoyed this recording a lot more than I had in a long time, so I feel like the E30 worked out really well with that. So So I've listened to a lot of other stuff. Obviously, I'm still in the early stages of getting to know the E30, but overall, I think it's a really excellent starter DAC, and I think you get great sound and a lot of features for the price, so we really can't complain. Now, we are going to be looking at some more expensive DACs in upcoming videos, and I'm always amazed at what great quality sound you can get for such little money these days, so it will be interesting to see what we get when we step it up a level or two. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, I think if you're in the market for your first DAC, external DAC, you really can't go wrong with this one, and I think the added features make it very attractive as well. So yeah, I would definitely check it out. So yeah, I think that's it for this one, guys. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.